History isn't always what it seems. Behind every famous moment, every well-known story, lie countless untold tales captured in forgotten photographs. Today, we're diving deep into images that reveal the hidden side of our past. Stories so incredible, you won't believe they're real. 1905. Meet JS Perez, testing his revolutionary atmospheric diving suit off the coast of England. What you're seeing is 300 pounds of copper and steel. The first suit to allow a human to walk on the ocean floor at crushing depths. This single photograph changed underwater exploration forever. But here's what history books don't tell you. Perez was actually a hat maker by trade. He had no engineering background, just an obsession with reaching the unreachable depths of the sea. 1902. Germany. Dr. Ferdinand Sauerbruch performs the world's first successful lung surgery. But look closer at this photo. Notice the audience of observers in formal dress, watching from gallery seats like it's a theater performance. Surgery was literally entertainment for the wealthy. Tickets were sold, programs were printed, lives hung in the balance while society ladies fanned themselves in the balcony. 1912, London. Thomas Edison's assistant, Clarence Madison Daly, poses proudly beside the X-ray machine he helped perfect. What he didn't know was that this photograph captured the last healthy moment of his life. Daly would become the first known death from radiation exposure in America. His hands, constantly exposed during demonstrations, began to deteriorate. By 1904, both arms had been amputated. He died at just 39 years old. 1928, Boston. Dr. Harvey Cushing operates on a patient's brain while the patient remains conscious, playing violin to ensure his motor functions aren't damaged. This revolutionary technique saved countless musicians and artists from losing their abilities. The patient, a professional violinist, continued playing throughout the 4-hour surgery. If his playing faltered, doctors knew they were touching the wrong area of his brain. This photograph captured the birth of awake brain surgery. 1846, Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. William Morton administers the first public demonstration of ether anesthesia. Before this moment, surgery was performed on fully conscious patients who were simply held down by assistants. The patient, Gilbert Abbott, had a tumor removed from his neck without screaming in agony. When he awoke, he said he felt nothing. The surgeon declared, "Gentlemen, this is no humbug." The age of painless surgery had begun. 1911. Harriet Quimby stands beside her Blériot monoplane, about to make history as the first woman to fly solo across the English Channel. But this isn't the story you think you know. Her triumph was completely overshadowed. She completed her historic flight on April 16, 1912, just 2 days after the Titanic sank. The world was too busy mourning to celebrate her achievement. 1943. Pacific Theater. These Navajo Marines are posing for what they believed was just another military photograph. They had no idea they were documenting one of World War II's most crucial secrets. They were code talkers, using their native language to create an unbreakable military code. The Japanese never cracked it because they had no reference point for the Navajo language. These men saved countless American lives, yet their story remained classified for decades. 1943, Langley Research Center. Katherine Johnson sits at her desk, working calculations that would one day send humans to the moon. But in this moment, she's fighting a different battle entirely. As a human computer, she was relegated to a segregated workspace, forced to use separate bathrooms, and credited on no official documents. This photograph captures brilliance confined by an unjust system, genius that would eventually break those very barriers. 1942. Poland. Witold Pilecki poses in his Polish army uniform, looking like any other soldier. But he was about to attempt the most dangerous mission in human history, voluntarily getting himself arrested and sent to Auschwitz concentration camp. His mission? Gather intelligence and organize resistance from inside the camp. He spent 947 days in hell, smuggling out detailed reports about the Holocaust that the Allies initially refused to believe. He escaped in 1943, but the world wasn't ready for his truth. 1912. Antarctica. Captain Lawrence Oates steps outside his tent into a raging blizzard, knowing he will never return. His last words, "I am just going outside, and may be some time." This photograph was taken just days before his heroic sacrifice. Oates was suffering from severe frostbite and knew he was slowing down his team's escape from the South Pole. By walking into the storm, he hoped to give his companions a better chance of survival. They didn't make it either, but his selflessness became legendary. 1955, Montgomery, Alabama. Rosa Parks sits in the front of a Montgomery City bus after the Supreme Court ruled bus segregation unconstitutional. But this famous photo tells only part of her story. Parks wasn't just a tired seamstress. She was a trained civil rights activist who had been planning this act of defiance for months. She had attended workshops on civil disobedience and was secretary of the Montgomery NAACP. Her arrest wasn't spontaneous, it was strategic. 1942. Warsaw Ghetto. Irina Sendler poses as a nurse, but she's actually running the most dangerous rescue operation of W2SA. She smuggled 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto in coffins, suitcases, and through sewage pipes. She kept detailed records of every child's real name and family, burying the lists in jars under an apple tree. When tortured by the Gestapo, she never revealed a single name. She was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 2007, but lost to Al Gore. 1917. Russia. This photograph shows the Battalion of Death. 300 Russian women who continued fighting on the Eastern Front after male soldiers began deserting en masse. Led by Maria Bochkareva, these women shamed male units into returning to combat through their example of courage. They were the first official female combat unit in modern warfare, yet their story was buried by both Soviet and Western historians. 1946, University of Pennsylvania. ENIAC, the world's first general-purpose electronic computer, weighs 30 tons and fills an entire room. But look at who's actually operating it. The programmers were all women. Betty Snyder, Marlyn Westkoff, Ruth Lichterman, Betty Holberton, Frances Bylas, and Kay McNulty. They literally invented computer programming, yet their contributions were ignored for decades. When ENIAC was unveiled to the press, these women were asked to step aside so only the male engineers could be photographed. 1928, Schenectady, New York. Felix the cat sits motionless under blazing hot lights for hours. This wasn't entertainment. It was evolution in action. Felix was the star of the first television broadcasts because his simple black and white design showed up clearly on primitive mechanical TV systems. Real actors couldn't sit still enough under the intense lighting required. A cartoon cat launched the television age. 1913, Highland Park, Michigan. Henry Ford's moving assembly line revolutionizes manufacturing. But this photograph captures something Ford desperately tried to hide. Employee turnover was astronomical, over 370% annually. Workers hated the repetitive, dehumanizing work so much they quit in droves. Ford was forced to more than double wages to $5 a day, not out of generosity, but out of desperation to keep workers. 1876, Philadelphia. Alexander Graham Bell demonstrates his telephone at the Centennial Exhibition. The Emperor of Brazil, Dom Pedro II, picks up the receiver and hears Bell reciting Hamlet's "to be or not to be" soliloquy from across the room. The Emperor dropped the phone and exclaimed, "My God, it talks!" But here's the twist. Bell almost didn't attend the exhibition. He was exhausted and wanted to stay home. It was his fiancée, Mabel Hubbard, who convinced him to go. Without her, the telephone might have been forgotten. 1903, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Orville Wright pilots the first powered flight while his brother Wilbur runs alongside. This 12-second flight changed human history forever. But only 5 people witnessed this moment, and most newspapers refused to report it. The Wright brothers were bicycle mechanics from Ohio. Who would believe they had conquered the skies? It took 5 years before the world accepted they had achieved flight. 1927, New York Harbor. The first successful demonstration of television transmission shows a clear image of Herbert Hoover speaking from Washington, D.C., to an audience 200 miles away in New York. The audience gasped when Hoover's face appeared on the small screen. One observer wrote, "It was as if a magician had torn away the veil of distance." Yet it would be another 20 years before television became common in American homes. 1962, MIT. Steve Russell and his team pose with what looks like a simple computer terminal, but they've just created the world's first video game, Space War. They built it for fun during their spare time, never imagining it would spawn a billion-dollar industry. The game took 200 hours to program and could only run on a computer that cost $120,000, about $1 million today. 1945, New Mexico. This innocent-looking photograph shows the Trinity Test Tower before the first atomic bomb detonation. The tower was vaporized instantly, leaving only a crater filled with green radioactive glass called trinitite. What's shocking is that scientists had a betting pool on whether the bomb would ignite the entire atmosphere and end all life on Earth. They detonated it anyway. 1895, New York City. These women on bicycles aren't just out for a ride. They're staging a revolution. The bicycle gave women unprecedented freedom and mobility, terrifying the establishment. Doctors warned that cycling would damage women's reproductive organs. Ministers preached that it was immoral. Newspapers ran cartoons mocking bicycle faces, the supposedly unattractive expression women developed from riding. 1902, Wanamaker's Department Store, Philadelphia. This innocent shopping scene actually documents a seismic social shift. For the first time in history, women could enter public commercial spaces unchaperoned. Department stores created the first socially acceptable public space for middle-class women. They could spend hours browsing, meet friends, even eat meals without male supervision. It was the beginning of women's economic independence. 1885, Babylon, New York. The Babylon Athletics pose for their team photo. Look carefully. You're seeing something that supposedly didn't exist. This is an integrated baseball team, 62 years before Jackie Robinson supposedly broke the color barrier. Integrated teams actually existed throughout the 1880s until organized baseball systematically excluded black players in the 1890s. 1920, New York City. Women line up to vote for the first time in a presidential election. But look at their faces. This isn't celebration. It's determination mixed with fear. Many of these women faced threats from husbands, employers, and neighbors who believed women voting would destroy the American family. Some had to choose between their marriages and their right to vote. They chose democracy. 1963, Birmingham, Alabama. Children as young as 6 years old march out of schools to join civil rights protests. This wasn't spontaneous. It was a calculated strategy called the Children's Crusade. Organizers knew that images of children being arrested and attacked with fire hoses would shock the nation. Over 1,000 children were arrested in a single day. The strategy worked. The images horrified Americans and galvanized support for civil rights. 1969, Stonewall Inn, New York City. Police raid what they think is just another routine harassment of a gay bar. Instead, they encounter the birth of the modern LGBTQ+ rights movement. For the first time, patrons fought back against police brutality. The riots lasted 6 days and transformed a marginalized community into a powerful movement for equality. This photograph captures the moment when hiding became fighting. 1955, Disneyland. Opening day was a complete disaster that nearly destroyed Walt Disney's reputation forever. The asphalt was so fresh that women's high heels sank into it. A gas leak forced the closure of several attractions. Counterfeit tickets led to massive overcrowding. This photograph shows Mickey Mouse being mobbed by angry parents demanding refunds. Walt Disney called it Black Sunday and banned all media from future openings. 1962. Centralia, Pennsylvania. What looks like morning mist is actually deadly carbon monoxide. An underground coal fire has been burning beneath this town for over 60 years. The fire started when the city tried to burn trash in an old mining pit. It spread through the abandoned coal mines beneath the town, making the ground so hot that tombstones cracked in the cemetery. Nearly 1,000 residents were relocated. The fire is expected to burn for another 250 years. December 28, 1879, Scotland. The twisted wreckage of the Tay Bridge tells a story of Victorian overconfidence and engineering hubris. During a severe storm, the bridge collapsed while a passenger train was crossing. All 75 people aboard died. But here's the shocking part. Engineers knew the bridge was defective. Bolts were missing, ironwork was cracked, and the bridge swayed dangerously in normal weather. The disaster was entirely preventable. January 15, 1919. Boston's North End. This destruction wasn't caused by war or earthquake. It was molasses. A massive tank containing 2.3 million gallons of molasses burst, creating a deadly wave 25 feet high. The wave moved at 35 miles per hour, killing 21 people and injuring 150. The molasses was so thick that cleanup took months. On hot summer days, the area still smells sweet from molasses that seeped into the pavement. 1906, San Francisco. This photograph shows the aftermath of what most people think was an earthquake. It wasn't. It was fire. The earthquake lasted less than a minute. The fires burned for 4 days. City officials dynamited entire blocks to create fire breaks, often destroying undamaged buildings in the process. More than 3,000 people died, and 250,000 were left homeless. The disaster was caused more by human incompetence than natural forces. 1888, New York City. The Great Blizzard of 1888 buried the city under 50 inches of snow. But this photograph reveals the real killer: isolation. Telegraph lines snapped, trains stopped running, and the city was cut off from the world. People froze to death just blocks from their homes, unable to see through the whiteout conditions. The disaster led to the creation of the first subway system. City leaders vowed never again to be paralyzed by weather. November 9th, 1965, New York City. The lights go out across the Northeast in the largest blackout in American history. But this photograph captures something unexpected: a baby boom. 9 months later, hospitals reported a significant spike in births. The blackout babies became a cultural phenomenon, proving that sometimes disasters bring people together in the most intimate ways. 1904, New York City. The General Slocum steamboat fire killed 1,021 people, mostly German immigrant women and children on a church outing. This photograph shows the charred wreckage, but the real tragedy was preventable negligence. Life preservers were filled with cork dust that disintegrated in water. Fire hoses rotted through when water pressure was applied. Lifeboats were wired to the deck and couldn't be launched. It remains New York's deadliest disaster before 9/11. 1953, Netherlands. The North Sea flood breached dikes across the country during a perfect storm, killing 1,836 people in a single night. This aerial photograph shows entire villages underwater, with only church spires visible above the waves. The disaster led to the Delta Works, the most ambitious flood control system ever built, featuring massive sea barriers that are considered one of the 7 wonders of the modern world. 1901, off the Greek island of Antikythera. Sponge divers discover what they think are corroded coins in an ancient shipwreck. They've actually found the world's first computer. 2,000 years before we thought computers existed. The Antikythera mechanism could predict eclipses, track planetary movements, and calculate Olympic Games schedules with stunning accuracy. It contains 37 bronze gears working in perfect harmony, technology we didn't think existed until medieval clockwork. 1914, Easter Island. Archaeologists make a startling discovery. The famous Moai heads actually have complete bodies buried underground. Some statues are over 30 feet tall with detailed petroglyphs covering their hidden bodies. The island's population collapsed due to deforestation and slave raids, leaving the statues partially buried by centuries of soil accumulation. This photograph doesn't exist because one of history's greatest losses left no visual record. The Library of Alexandria, humanity's first attempt to collect all human knowledge, was destroyed not in a single dramatic fire, but through centuries of neglect and budget cuts. Imagine if we still had the complete works of Sophocles, the original calculations of Archimedes, or the first accurate map of the world. All lost because knowledge was considered less important than military spending. 1911, Peru. American historian Hiram Bingham poses at Machu Picchu, which he claimed to have discovered. But look carefully at this photograph. Those are local guides who led him there. The Quechua people never lost Machu Picchu. Families had been living there for generations, farming the terraces and maintaining the structures. Bingham didn't discover a lost city. He publicized a living community and took credit for their preservation efforts. 1922, Egypt. Howard Carter peers into King Tutankhamun's tomb by candlelight. When asked what he could see, he replied, "Wonderful things." But this photograph hides a scandal that rocked the archaeological world. Carter and his team secretly looted artifacts before officially opening the tomb. They smuggled out jewelry, statues, and other treasures, selling them to private collectors. The curse of the pharaohs wasn't supernatural. It was guilt over grave robbing. 1953, England. This photograph shows the original manuscript of Lord of the Flies being typed by William Golding's wife. The world's most famous novel about the darkness of human nature was actually written by a man who believed deeply in human goodness. Golding wrote the book as a response to a children's adventure story he found too optimistic. He wanted to show what would really happen if children were stranded alone. The irony is that real-life examples of stranded children show they typically cooperate and care for each other. Meet Violet Jessup, the woman who survived not one, not two, but 3 maritime disasters. She was aboard the Olympic when it collided with HMS Hawke in 1911. She was working as a stewardess on the Titanic when it sank in 1912. She helped load lifeboats and held a baby while waiting for rescue. In 1916, she was serving as a nurse on the Britannic when it hit a mine and sank. She jumped from the ship and narrowly avoided being chopped up by the propellers. She lived to age 83. Frane Salak of Croatia might be either the luckiest or unluckiest man alive. In 1962, his train derailed and plunged into a river. He survived with a broken arm while 17 died. In 1963, his plane's door blew off mid-flight. He was sucked out but landed in a haystack. In 1966, his bus skidded off a road into a river. In 1970, his car caught fire. In 1973, another car fire. In 1995, he was hit by a bus. In 1996, he drove off a cliff but jumped out just in time. Then, in 2003, at age 73, he won the Croatian lottery, over $1 million. 1848, Vermont. Railroad foreman Phineas Gage poses for what would become one of medicine's most important photographs. A tamping iron had shot through his skull like a bullet, destroying much of his frontal lobe. Miraculously, he survived and even returned to work. But his personality changed completely, from a responsible foreman to an impulsive, profane stranger. His case helped scientists understand that different parts of the brain control different aspects of personality. 1946, Japan. Tsutomu Yamaguchi survived the atomic bombing of Hiroshima, then took a train to Nagasaki, where he survived the second atomic bomb 3 days later. He's the only person officially recognized as surviving both nuclear attacks. At Hiroshima, he was less than 2 miles from ground zero when the bomb exploded. Burns covered the left side of his body, but he was determined to return to work in Nagasaki. He arrived just in time for the second bomb, which destroyed his office building while he was inside describing the first bombing to his supervisor. 1912, Atlantic Ocean. Charles Lightoller, the second officer of the Titanic, not only survived the sinking, but went on to save 130 Allied soldiers at Dunkirk 28 years later. During the Titanic disaster, Lightoller helped launch lifeboats and was the last officer to abandon ship. In 1940, at age 66, he took his private yacht across the English Channel to rescue British troops trapped at Dunkirk. He made multiple trips under enemy fire, proving that heroism isn't limited by age. 1971. Peru. Julian Köpke was the sole survivor when Lanza Flight 508 broke apart at 10,000 feet during a thunderstorm. Still strapped to her seat, the 17-year-old fell 2 miles through the Amazon rainforest canopy and survived. She walked through the jungle for 10 days, following a stream as her father had taught her, until she found a lumber camp. She was the only survivor out of 93 passengers and crew. Lost civilizations. 1994, Turkey. Archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovers what he thinks are medieval gravestones. He's actually found the world's oldest temple complex, built 11,500 years ago, before agriculture, before the wheel, before written language. Göbekli Tepe required sophisticated organization and engineering that supposedly didn't exist in hunter-gatherer societies. The discovery forced us to completely rewrite the story of human civilization. 1963, Cappadocia, Turkey. A homeowner knocking down a wall in his basement discovers something impossible: an underground city that housed 20,000 people. Derinkuyu extends 18 stories underground with ventilation systems, wine cellars, stables, chapels, and schools. Entire generations lived their complete lives without ever seeing sunlight. It was built to hide from Arab raids but was later completely forgotten. 79 AD, Pompeii. These aren't sculptures. They're human beings, preserved at the moment of death by volcanic ash. Giuseppe Fiorelli realized that cavities in the hardened ash perfectly preserve the shape of decomposed bodies. By pouring plaster into these voids, he created perfect casts showing people's final moments. A man shielding his face, a dog trying to break free from its chain, a family embracing as death approached. 1911, Peru. This photograph shows terraced mountainsides that archaeologists initially dismissed as natural formations. They're actually the remains of a civilization that fed millions of people using techniques we're only now beginning to understand. The Inca built over 1 million acres of agricultural terraces throughout the Andes Mountains. These terraces prevented erosion, conserved water, and created microclimates that allowed crops to grow at extreme altitudes. When the Spanish conquered the Inca, they abandoned this technology, leading to widespread famine. 1900, Crete. British archaeologist Arthur Evans uncovers the Palace of Knossos, revealing the sophisticated Minoan civilization that ruled the Mediterranean 4,000 years ago. The palace had running water, flush toilets, and a drainage system more advanced than most European cities in 1900. The Minoans were peaceful traders who created the first known European writing system. Their civilization mysteriously collapsed around 1450 BC, possibly due to a massive volcanic eruption. 1897, New York City. This vast network of pneumatic tubes once carried messages across Manhattan faster than any modern delivery service. Canisters shot through underground tubes at 35 miles per hour, delivering documents in minutes. The system was so efficient that it handled over 95% of the city's urgent communications. Then the telephone killed it overnight. Millions of dollars of infrastructure became instantly obsolete. 1957, Idaho. The Convair X-6 was designed to be the ultimate strategic bomber. Powered by a nuclear reactor, it could stay airborne for weeks without refueling. The project was abandoned when engineers realized a minor crash would create a radioactive disaster zone. They built the reactor, they built the plane, but sanity prevailed before they put them together. 1970, AT&T introduces the picture phone at the World's Fair. For just $160 per month, about $1,200 today, you could make video calls from specially equipped booths. It was a complete commercial failure. People hated how they looked on camera. The image quality was terrible, and almost nobody they wanted to call had one. It would take 40 years and smartphones to make video calling mainstream. 1938, Germany. The Volkswagen Beetle was originally called the Strength Through Joy car, designed to be affordable for every German worker. But this photograph hides a dark secret. The car was part of Nazi propaganda. Workers paid into a savings program but never received their vehicles. The money went to fund the war effort instead. After the war, the British Army almost scrapped the entire project, thinking no one would want such an ugly, impractical car. 1969, France. The Concorde supersonic jet makes its first flight, promising to revolutionize air travel by flying faster than the speed of sound. For 27 years, the Concorde represented the pinnacle of aviation technology. But it was too expensive, too noisy, and too fuel-hungry to be profitable. The future of air travel turned out to be bigger, cheaper planes, not faster ones. 1981, IBM releases its first personal computer, expecting to sell maybe 250,000 units over 5 years. They sold that many in the first year alone. IBM executives couldn't imagine why anyone would want a computer at home. They thought personal computers would be used mainly for storing recipes and balancing checkbooks. They completely missed the coming digital revolution. Every photograph tells a story, but the most fascinating stories are often the ones hidden in plain sight. Behind every famous moment, every technological breakthrough, every disaster and triumph, are human beings living, struggling, and creating in ways we never imagined. History isn't just about the famous names and dates we memorize. It's about the countless untold stories captured in forgotten photographs, waiting for us to discover their secrets. What story will your photographs tell future generations?